Modern readers often treat the gospel accounts of the bleeding woman in Matthew, Mark, and Luke as a private medical miracle. A purely medical interpretation fails to account for the massive cosmic mechanics at play in this biblical narrative. Her true crisis is only visible when we rewind to the uncompromising legal baseline that governed her everyday life, Leviticus chapter 15. The Torah draws a strict line between two concepts, awon, which is moral guilt, and tameh, which is ritual impurity. The woman carried zero moral culpability for her bleeding. She was not being punished for a sin. Instead, tameh represents a ritual incompatibility with the sacred space of Yahweh's tabernacle. The unceasing flow resulted in total liturgical and communal exile, barring her from the sacred presence of God. Leviticus 15 divides female bodily reality into two distinct legal categories. This graphic maps the distinction. On the left, normal menstruation, a bounded 7-day cycle. On the right, zob, a pathological, unbounded discharge outside the customary period. Its severity is anchored in Leviticus 17:11, which establishes that the life of the flesh is in the blood. When blood continually drains from the body, it signifies life leakage. Mortality is operating proleptically. Death is actively exerting its power within her living flesh, day after day, evacuating vitality from a frame unable to preserve its own container. Under Leviticus 15:28, the purification countdown cannot begin until the discharge stops. Because her flow never ceased, her timeline froze at day 0. She could never complete the 7 days of cleansing, meaning the 8th day for priestly presentation and sanctuary access was permanently blocked. For 12 years, she was trapped in an unchosen existential nightmare. Her covenant time was suspended, and her public identity collapsed into her affliction. How does a human being locked in 12 years of empirical despair suddenly break free? The human experience knowledge model tracks the internal sequence of transformation, moving from baseline reality through perception to internal dialogue. Hearing reports about Jesus acted as a perceptual interruption, breaking into her closed world and forcing a cognitive shift. The genesis point of this incredible miracle occurred entirely in her mind, long before her hand ever reached out. Matthew 9:21 records this inward reasoning. For she kept saying to herself, "If only I may touch his garment, I shall be made well." The Greek verb used here is elegan. It is written in the imperfect active tense. This tense denotes continuous, habitual internal speech. She repeatedly fought off a decade of medical despair by actively reframing her reality over and over again in her own heart. This cognitive shift is called noetic renewal. It is the necessary internal prerequisite that must occur before any physical action takes place. Spirit-enabled perception reorganizes a person's physical agency, moving beyond a fleeting positive thought to the embodiment of active faith. Her renewed agency compelled her to press through the crowd toward a specific target. She reached for the crespidon, the Greek translation of the Hebrew tzitzit. These were the covenant tassels commanded in Numbers 15. She was reaching for the faithful Israelite who perfectly embodied the very covenant from which she had been excluded for 12 years. Under the Old Covenant, sacred space was static and defensive. If an unclean person touched something clean, the impurity spread outward, requiring defensive boundaries. Jesus operates as the mobile sanctuary, the embodied temple carrying the unmediated presence of Yahweh. By the logic of Leviticus, the moment her unclean hand touches his garment, Jesus should contract her ritual defilement. Instead, we witness reversed contagion. Christ's holiness is offensive, not defensive. Resurrection power blasts outward from him, neutralizing the impurity without the sanctuary contracting a single drop of defilement. Mark 5:29 describes this using the Greek verb exeranthe, written in the aorist passive tense. This tense proves the healing was an instantaneous, once-for-all historical event. It dried up the subterranean fountain of her disease immediately, without any gradual rehabilitation. Christ's holiness invaded the corruption at its subterranean source, drying the fountain and swallowing up decreation at the root. If the story ended with the physical cure, she would have survived her illness, but remained socially anonymous and trapped in shame. That is why Jesus intentionally stops the entire procession. He refuses an anonymous transaction in order to force a face-to-face covenant encounter. She falls at his feet and tells the whole truth, publicly exposing 12 years of hidden exile to the surrounding crowd. In response, Jesus overrides her condition with the royal imperative, tharseo, take courage, and addresses her with a highly specific title. He calls her thegoter, daughter. This is the only recorded instance in the Gospels where Jesus directly addresses an individual woman with this title. In a single word, Christ dismantled her condition-based label and publicly conferred true covenant adoption, restoring her dignity and her place within the family. Jesus completes the encounter with a final declaration in Matthew 9:22. Your faith has made you well, using the Greek word sasokin. Sasokin is in the perfect active tense. This tense defines an action completed in the past that carries abiding, permanent results in the present. Now she does not leave in tentative recovery. She stands in a permanent state of holistic covenant salvation. This individual reversal points directly to the grand canonical matrix of Scripture, anticipating Pentecost and the constitution of the Church. The Church exists as the anti-throneness community, a new creation reality where disease, shame, and fallen conditions no longer possess the final authority over human identity.